Our presentation today is a little bit unusual from the standpoint of we're talking mostly mechanical engineers, and Mr. Ryan is not a mechanical engineer. In fact, he is the founder of JPRA Architects. Now, most of you walked in a little bit after we set up the pictures in the lobby, but on your way out, take a look at some of the things that Mr. Ryan has designed and actually brought to fruition. I think you'll be impressed. Our speaker today is Jim Ryan. He's chairman of JPRA Architects, multi-award-winning firm which he founded in 1978. As chairman, Jim provides input and guidance to the architectural design staff and serves as the director of the firm's marketing and business development activities. His projects have been recognized with distinguished honors bestowed by the American Institute of Architects, International Council of Shopping Centers, Urban Land Institute, and many other industry establishments. His projects include Somerset Collection in Troy, Bay Harbor Marina District in Bay Harbor, the Mall at Millennia in Orlando, Florida, the shops at Willow Glen in Plano, Texas, and Blue Water Villages in Kent, United Kingdom, and also some other things which are displayed on the boards outside. Jim received his bachelor's degree in architecture from a school you've probably all heard of, Lawrence Technological University. And in 1997, he was presented with the university's first annual Distinguished Alumni Architectural Award. He's a registered architect in 18 states, a member of the AIA, ICSC, ULI, and NCARB. He has lectured at schools and universities and both speaker and chairpersons of various ICSC and ULI functions. And most recently, he was chairman of the 2002 ICSC Center Build Conference and now serves on its advisory board. He's involved in the following Lawrence Tech University activities and committees, so he is well tied to the university and supports many of your activities. He's on the LTU Advisory Board, the Distinguished Alumni Award recipient, the Steering Committee, the Scholarship Fund, Dean Selection Committee, the LTU Freshman Class Speaker, LTU Invitational Juror, LTU Accreditation Committee, and the Alumni Board. Now, you may think, why are we bringing an architect in to talk to engineers? And the reason is, you know, that's what he asked. Now, I'll answer that question. The whole point of all of these guest lectures are to open your eyes beyond the field of engineering, to make you realize that there are things that you can do and become in the field of entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is very important to both yourselves, as you'll find out as you go through your career, as well as the state of Michigan and the country. The things that you'll learn from Mr. Ryan in terms of what it took for him to be an entrepreneur and be successful, believe me, are very convertible into any kind of a field of mechanical engineering. Most of you know me, and you know that I spent 35 years at Ford Motor Company, which is a pretty lengthy career. What I learned there was to be successful as an engineer are the same kinds of skills you need to be successful as an entrepreneur. So, without further ado, our guest, I will pass out attendance cards and also the handouts for the session. Mr. Ryan.
Thanks. I'd like to start off by wishing this were just a round table where, you know, we're all down at the same level. And usually I've been involved in speaking where I'm usually higher than the audience. I feel like I'm on a podium. So it's great to look all of you straight in the eye and just say that this is going to be straight out. It's pretty simple, and I've got to go through 54 years of involvement, all the way from my teen years to what I'm doing today in about a half an hour. So it's probably 10 years a minute or something like that. And I think you'll be able to relate to some of this. And what I'd like to do is talk about maybe the first 24 years and then the second 30 years. And to you guys and gals, I know just probably less than 20 years ago, most of you weren't even on the planet. So how can you relate to that? How can you relate to somebody like myself that's been that far back? I can only tell you that a lot of things that I have learned and is still learning apply today. I'm going to talk about the second part, the last 30 years first. And what it relates to is the firm that I founded in 1978, and what were the conditions of founding that firm, conditions that might apply to you guys and gals, where that firm has gone and where it is today, and what my relationship is. And then we're going to go backwards and look at who is that person, where did that person come from, that was able to do that. And it's going to be kind of a distorted and truthful, straight-out session, because doing this seminar here has made me look back at some of the things that I didn't even realize were reasons for doing what I did. Today, JPRA is about a 100-person office. I say that. We fluctuate between 96 and 98 people. In 1978, let's presume that you're with me on this and that all the conditions that were ready for me to start a firm were there. I had contacts. I had some history in what I was doing. I had worked in the Detroit metro area for 10, 15 years. I was now finally out of school, and we'll talk more about that, this institution. And so it seemed like the conditions were ripe for me, and frankly, after working for about 7 other architectural firms in the area, I really didn't have any place else to go. And it was that naive, and it was that cavalier. It wasn't arrogant, it wasn't self-centered, it's just that I really didn't, in my own mind, say, well, I want to go work for somebody else now. It was, well, I've got these clients, and I had a house and a mortgage and a couple of kids, and because at that time, in 1978, I was 42 years old. So just starting a business was kind of late by your standards today. Most of you are going to be far beyond that when you get to be my age at that time. So, but it was a way of life for me. It was, you know, the conditions were there, and so I started. And what I started was, the most important thing at the time was to go in what I knew best. And the 9 previous years that led to that point of starting an office was that I was involved in a kind of broad sense retail design. And the gentleman that some of you just had come from the lecture is probably one of the foremost Michigan entrepreneurs, and it's a hard act to follow. Al Taubman, who was just in the other room, is a client of mine. In fact, I lived long enough to not only work for Al almost 40 years ago, I'm now working for his sons, or my firm, I would say, is working for his sons. And that was a very important change for me to go from not knowing where I wanted to go to start to concentrate and focus on a career choice of doing in architecture now one thing, and that was to do retail. I mean, past experiences have led me to doing some schools and churches and houses and all the things that the diversity that you as engineers will work on, all these kinds of things, including more or less today the environment, which is every time I open up a Zig White, which is a kind of a categorically done report on what's going on in the industry, I see how engineering firms, especially environmental engineering firms, are growing exponentially 3 times as fast as architectural firms. And their employment, which used to house people like 8, 10, 12, now these firms are 1,200, 1,500, 3,000, 4,000, with 1 office, 5 offices, 12 offices, 15 offices, nationally and internationally. So I'm looking at how fast your industry is growing on a curve that's just going right out of sight. And if you heard Al talk today at all, one of the things, and I had lunch with him and a few other people in a room upstairs, he was talking about the opportunities in Michigan alone. And when I think of it, our firm with 100 people, we're working probably today in 17 states at the moment. We don't have 1 project in Michigan. That's not really good news for us, but we don't have 1 project in Michigan. But what the lesson was that early on I saw that in developing this young firm in 1978, young at heart because it was just beginning, was the fact that we couldn't just survive on 1 client. Could we survive on 1 industry was the next question. And at that time I made a quantitative decision that if we were going to do 1 thing, it wasn't going to be a niche market. It wasn't going to be, let's try it. It was going to be, let's do it. And I had 2 young people working for me at the time. I say a half a secretary because I couldn't really afford a full-time secretary, so I shared that young lady with a contractor who occupied a space next door. We had 600 square feet, I had 2 people, and I hung that shingle out there. Actually, what I did first was go to the bank, put my house on the line for about 10 grand, and started the office. So there was a loan. I got familiar with attorneys right away. I got familiar with what banks were right away because I wasn't taught any of that beginning business. And I mentioned this early on, naivete was part of my repertoire. So, but I did have good contacts from the previous 9 years, and we'll talk, as I said, more about that. Those contacts related to what I think today is still one of the most important things that all of you are going to experience, and that is relationships. Relationships with your coworker, who someday might become a client. Relationships with your, certainly the leaders of the firm, who might come back and work for you, and I've had that happen. Your actual person that hires you today, 25 or 30 years later, might come back and actually ask you for a job. And that happened to me. It was a strange event, of course. And the relationships with their clients. You're not going to get it right away. As a junior or intern, you know, you'll want to be sitting in those sessions right away. It's not going to happen right away. It's going to happen if you show the enthusiasm and the trust of your employer, and you do that thing that everybody talks about, more effort, spend more time at it. Sacrifice is the number one word. And if anybody asks me, you know, those previous 24 years we're going to talk about, what that led to starting your own business was tenacity. It's the only word I could really think of. The tenacity to not stop, not give up. And if you had a dream, there were many people talking to me about starting that business in 1978. Nobody knew what the 80s were going to hold. And for me, going into retail design, the 80s, unbeknownst to me, were the boon era of retail. So it set our firm on the map, so to speak, that we were doing in the late 70s and early 80s, what I called, you know, $1 million renovations, which amounted to, and our fees were pretty good at that time. They were 10% fees, so we're getting $100,000 to do $1 million renovation. And I was talking to my friends, the peer group friends who were, you know, other architects doing schools, houses, churches, civil work, and stuff like that. They were getting 6% fees, and they couldn't understand, how in the hell can you get those fees? I mean, you don't even have that much background. I said, that's what the industry is paying, and I started doing homework. I started researching my competition and started not envying, but saying, those are really great guys. Those architects that were commanding those kind of fees really were turning over responsible projects and building trust in those relationships. Now, I don't mean relationships by having to take somebody out to dinner, as a lot of the people who worked in my era in the auto industry, architects who were working for the auto guys, had to take them out and wine and dine them to get a mechanical belt producing plant or something like that. I never took out a client once. In fact, the clients were taking me out because they knew I couldn't afford it. It was interesting that that relationship was a bond that today, I'll give you an example. We have one client that we've been doing their work for 30 years. That is really, by today's standards, unusual. They're in the Fortune 500, and they would not use another architect. And the most important lesson there was, and I pass this on to you guys, is never get a fat head. Because I always looked at it, and I've told people, and that's why I wish you were all down here in a round table, I told my own people, think of yourself as a waitress. And they said, what? I mean, you're a professional, you know, you got all these papers and things like that to prove that. So think of this, you're a service business. You're delivering something that has been ordered. They want that order fulfilled. They want it fulfilled in the time frame that they expect to get it. They want it fresh. They want it tasty, or, you know, good design. They want it creative, which is your end of it, the engineering end of it, and the architectural end of it. And they want it with a smile. They want you to be happy about what you're doing. So I can't think of a better metaphor to put it down to a level where it's important to understand that it doesn't mean you're no better than a waitress, but you're delivering that same service. And don't forget it. It's important that every job, after 30 years, and there's 15 major projects, award-winning projects, for this client, some are and some aren't award. We've had our moments. We've wrestled with them about fees. We wrestled about extra services. We wrestled with them about mistakes, you know, liabilities. But we hung on and proved that we never gave up on the project. Even if we were over our fee budget, we stayed the course and finished that project. That's a bond and a relationship that I wish I had with every client. Later, 10, 15 later, I realized that, you know, as we continued to develop what I call the tentacles of this this octopus. We were the head octopus, and all those tentacles went out. It was important to know that if one of those in this core market for us, this retail market, if one of those tentacles got cut off, one of our clients went away, that we still had 4 or 5 other tentacles. We weren't just doing work because one guy who had given us all this work all this time was his favorite architect, and we couldn't do anything else. We made sure he understood that our role was independent. And I think that's one of the things that in 1978, when I started the business after working for many architects, I wanted to be independent. I didn't want to work for somebody anymore. I didn't want to be a junior partner. And I had been in 2 firms, a junior partner. I actually paid money to become the junior partner with the premise that as time went on, I would buy more stock or I would get more responsibility. But after just the first year in one case, I realized that was a fictitious story. It wasn't going to happen. So going forward, I started thinking that, if I can't have it all, and that was kind of a naive, gesture again, at this firm. In other words, if I can't have my own autonomy in this firm, then I'm going to have to do it on my own. And each time I left those 2 firms preceding to the starting of the JPRA Architects, I made sure I left on a friendly basis. Hard to do. When you're talking about splitting, and it's a relationship now, splitting a relationship, leaving on good terms is very hard to do. Today I still have a relationship with these people. We talk, we don't maybe socialize as much as we used to, but it's important that that relationship is enduring. The people that are your co-workers, as I said and started to say, are future allies of yours that could be your partner. You don't know. So having those relationships endure is important. Continuing the growth of JPRA, we got lucky. In 1978, there were 2 years in the late 70s that retail was starting to really become more than just a development entity. It became a world entity because retail was expanding all over the country. And I won't get into all the demographics of that other than the fact that our firm was doing small renovations. Those renovations and that client relationship led to another renovation, led to finally a freestanding project. One thing led to another. So in 1978, starting from 1988, took 10 years, almost 10 years of not groveling. We were getting great fees. I had paid off that $10,000 loan the first year in business. I had quadrupled my income by going it alone. But the one thing that was another important message to me was this independency that I talked about. No way, absolutely no way was I going to go it alone. It couldn't have been done. Nor could this firm be what it is today, considering going it alone. So I had to change. And I always said that in architecture, and in engineering for that matter, any of the creative arts that we're involved in, you should be happy that you're in it, because there's many industries where you can't change. Our industry demands that you change. You have to change because of quantitative things happening. Computer industry, we were drawing things by hand in my days, and that we had to transition and change into the computer industry. We were doing so many things the old way that I was really falling behind. I couldn't handle it all. Our growth was coming, so I did one of the smartest things I could do, and that's invite a couple people in to share the responsibility. I actually thought I would never do that. I thought that, the name on the door at the time was called, we were 3 people, James Patrick Ryan, Associates, Architects and Planners, PC. And it was a nice long name with 3 people and a few projects. And I did that because I thought I needed to create a large sounding entity. And it was just a few people. But I had a secretary who had a hard time saying that. Every day picking up the James Patrick Ryan. So she finally said one day when I was walking in, JPRA Architects, and it stuck. So today, 30 years later, we're JPRA Architects. Those initials are not the initials of a person, although they are. They're the initials of a company. So taking my name off of the door was the biggest revelation that we had in my way of looking at the company, because it wasn't one person anymore. It was many people, hopefully. And we were growing to 10, 12, 15 as 1980s were upon us and the expansions were upon us and we were growing. The smartest thing I did in 1981 was to bring in 2 young guys, both Lawrence Tech graduates. That wasn't the reason, but it was important to know that we did think alike And that would be a little dangerous in business to have partners that all think alike. I think there's got to be some tension there, some electricity there. But we had the electricity because I was the design part, there was a production part, and then there was a business development part. That brought 3 separate entities to the business, even though I owned all the stock at the time. And I realized that to keep these people in a busy time when in Detroit and the metro area was really building a lot of things in the early 80s, offices, expansion hospitals, a lot of retail was going up. That was important to keep these guys. I made them a deal so-called that they couldn't refuse. It really wasn't enough, but it was to bring them in as partners and sell them some of my own stock. Now, we dealt with guys that I had really not met before, because when you go into business, the entrepreneurial way is, and the message to me was, make sure, Jim, you get a good lawyer. Make sure you get a good accountant, you know. And make sure if you're going to spend any money on any kind of investment, you get a good broker, have a good insurance guy, and bond with those people. And I learned another lesson, it never came true, was that you should only hire people that are your consultants that can bring you work. But it never happened. We never hired a mechanical engineer that actually brought us in because he landed a client. I never hired a structural engineer. I never hired a lawyer or an accountant or a financial advisor. And it was a mistake, something that I'm just passing on, that when you get to that point, you start asking those people, who are you dealing with? Who are those rich guys that own all those wealthy homes and those businesses out there? Couldn't they be my clients? Could you introduce me? Never occurred to me. It was kind of dumb, really. But the things that were going on, I was fat and happy with the core retail thing that I was doing. We could have grown into a different kind of a firm, doing different kinds of businesses. Would I have liked it as much doing, you know, high-end residential? I don't know. Could I have made more money doing industrial work? I don't know. I doubt it. I happen to choose, by my previous life experience, that first 24 years, the retail industry. And it was the most lucrative, the most rewarding, and the most enjoyable trip for me over the last 30 years. I learned that developers was a bad word. Aren't those the guys that take properties and knock all the trees down and build these vast parking lots and do these ugly looking buildings that my wife goes and shops or I go and shop in? Well, I thought maybe I could change that, and we did. We started to become selective on what we wanted to work at. We started saying, you know, look at the guy's history. I mean, look, now we have websites to look at instead of driving all over the country and finding out where the pictures were of that project. You know, they don't do what we want to do, so we started narrowing in on a little higher level quality and a little higher level of work, and the responsibility grew, and the liability grew. I mean, we were now dealing with insurance companies that said, well, man, you got to carry $1 million liability, and that's going to cost you $55,000, $60,000 a year. Well, you had to start transitioning those costs. You had to be doing good work, and you had to be doing repeat work. So every client that we worked for, we haven't always repeated the work. We've had good relationships. We started a project, maybe went through that project, and what has happened, though, is we've had a built environment to draw from. It wasn't that particular person we were going to do a project from, but his recommendation or his project was a natural marketing tool for us to say, there it is, take a look at it. Some of the pictures are out here, more recent stuff that we've done, we still use. So those two young guys in 1981 ultimately, just 12 years ago, became my true partners because I started a buy and sell 12 years ago where I was getting at that age now where I started taking a look at how am I going to transition this firm to its next level, because I'm not going to be here forever. I'd like to think that, but I'm not going to be here forever. Like somebody asked Al Taubman, and he said, I think at 84 years old, do you think I ought to get a job? What are you doing now? And he said, well, I'm giving my money away. Well, I'm not at that level yet, but so 12 years ago we started this transition. And the good thing about that transition was in the business development cycle, in the entrepreneurial cycle of taking the firm to the next level of ownership, taking the firm to the next level of how you as a young person can grow in that firm. So intern development programs. We have probably 8 different committees all the way down to the picnic committee, believe it or not. I mean, we actually have people who are concerned about where we're going to go for a picnic. We have once a month luncheons, that kind of stuff. And that isn't necessarily the underlying marketing or entrepreneurial message, but it's all part of that chain of thing about being close to your people and about understanding that you're not really that far removed. So 12 years ago, we started a buy and sell, and 2 years ago, I sold the firm. So we had 10 years of buyout by my two principal guys that I brought in. That was part of the business plan, and I am now working back for the firm. So I'm not the owner anymore. I'm chairman of the company, which I think is kind of a Walhalla name, but I have my own projects. I'm still in business development. Nothing has changed except I'm not involved in the minutia. I still want to be, but I'm not involved in the minutia. And that kind of completes the story. Other than these two guys now have 5 other partners. We have transitioned to another level of bringing young people in for 8 or 10 years. They'll stay with the firm, grow with the firm knowledgeably, and that's true in any engineering firm. Becoming part of it today is actually easier. It's easy to make a partner. It's hard to get rid of a partner. So be careful what you wish for. If you want to be part of a firm, make sure that is the firm you really want to be with, your long-term goals. Don't take it too early, and don't wait too long. Everybody that wants to be a part of something, I keep asking the question, why? Do you really know why? You're infatuated with the environment, you're infatuated with a client. Do you like these people? Do you like what you're doing? Do you like the work? Is it progressive? Is it aggressive? Is it creative? Is it the things that you were taught in this institution to not take for granted? It's very important that you know who you're going to be working for. I don't think you have any quick reason to make that judgment today or even 5 or 6 years from now, this audience that I'm talking about. Again, I just want to put it in time frame. At 42, starting a firm in 1978, 30 years later, a tremendously successful firm. And one of the things you'll see in my handout, one of my favorite quotes, and I think this goes to whether you want to play tennis, a good game of golf, swim faster, boogie board faster, or whatever it is. A smart man, a truly smart man or girl, lady, woman, surrounds himself with people smarter than they are. That's John D. Rockefeller. And I hung that thing up in front of my board and I looked at it every day and kept looking at, it's impossible for me to be in Texas one day and Florida the next day and watch the production guys and watch the design and watch the administration. You have to learn how to trust people. That comes in the first 24 years from a completely different person. It came from some of the lessons I learned in this school, my mentors. I had a lot of great mentors. I changed jobs over a 10-year time frame 4 times, twice getting laid off and starting the next day working again, so I never was really out of work. But it gave me the tenacity again to not let anything slip by. It's time for me to take off. I can shlove off a little bit. I've been working all for 10 years now. It's time for me to take some time off. I never thought that way. I thought there's still another opportunity to raise the bar a little higher. And starting the firm and asking these two guys in, Jim Grigsby and Bill Bites, who are now the president and chief operating officer of the firm I founded, are doing phenomenal. So now we have a firm that has not only grown exponentially inside, it's grown by its partnership relationships. Everybody's still entrepreneuring their own project, entrepreneuring their own life through suggestions and being part of the firm. Every single person in the firm, I told Jim and Bill this in a meeting we had the other day, there's probably about 15 or 18 people that I looked down the list aren't on any committee. And I said, how come? And they said, no, maybe they slipped through the cracks, maybe they don't want to be. I said, they don't have a choice. They're not just here to pass the time and do the work and go home at night. They need to be a part of this firm. All their social workers and buddies are. So I don't care if it's on the luncheon committee, but they need to be a part of it. That's how you get them involved in the firm. That's how they have something to say. And that's how they are the future leaders, because they are suggestive now of what's going on in our world. They need to read all those magazines. They need to read everything that's going on the websites. They need to know who our competition is. And we need to draw them out, because there's an entrepreneurial spirit in every one of them. We just need to hear it. As you know, you've been in these sessions many times. As the speaker stands down here, and at the end of it, we say, any questions? There's a complete big silence in the audience. Say, well, geez, I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep. But you need to come out. And I don't care if you take a psychotherapy class and coming out, but I'm going to go now to the previous 24 years and talk about that person that wasn't me that was leading this charge, because I did change. My background in the early teen years, even before teen years, and I realized this when I started preparing for this session, was what I didn't realize is that a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and 14-year-old, I knew how to make money. I mean, I caddied, I did, in those days, believe me, and this will age me, I set bowling pins by hand, you know, got paid for it. I was a soda jerk. I did lots of odd things. But I saved the money, and I had the money. I came from a family that was 6th grade education, so I was the first generation out of my wife's side and my family's side, on both mother and father, that ever even attempted to go beyond 6th grade. That was tough because there was no mentorship there. They didn't understand. This guy is talking about drawing, and I was sketching things all the time as a 12 and 13-year-old, and he wants to go out, he doesn't want to stay home, he's out with his buddies. My buddies and I were making money. It wasn't money driven, but I knew that they didn't have any affordability. And when that transitioned into school, elementary school, I realized at that time I wasn't very smart either. I could hardly make it through some of the classes, but the art classes I excelled in. Those were always A's, and they were always inviting me to draw the backdrops for things like that at that young 15, 16-year-old age. The one decision in my life, and there's several of them, that I made that changed the whole picture was that I lived next door to a guy who went to a school that I had never heard of before, high school. I lived next to Pershing High School, which I don't know if any of you know, the east side of Detroit in the early 50s, was a moderate kind of a school where a lot of, I call them gang people, went to and just went there to get through school. I went to Cass Tech High School, and I haven't got a clue other than my next door neighbor saying, well, I'm going down there, Jim, for foundry. And I said, well, do they have any drawing classes down there? He said, yeah, they have an architectural program. Architectural program, yeah. And I said, maybe I'll do that. And it was kind of cavalier again. But as a quantitative decision, one of the few that, again, I didn't seek it out. I didn't look on some website, or I didn't look in the paper and say, what's the greatest school you could go to? It was brought to me. And I mentioned this to Greg, I think, and to even the dean today, that, we all talk about the decisions we make in life. Many of them, almost all of them, are brought to you. You're not created by you, but there are opportunities that I think when something is brought to you, that you have enough background and enough trust in yourself or enough risk in yourself to make the decision to do. So I went to Cass Tech. It was 3 bus rides and an hour-long trip down there, and I know that doesn't mean a lot, but at that time it was quite a quantitative jump. And I went down there, not because I had a lot of good buddies going there, because I heard about that architectural program they had. It was a technical school in Detroit, still recognized today as a top school. Not quite what it was in the 50s. So from 50 to 53, I went to high school. And during that time, I got 2 jobs, which was interesting. Again, the making money side of it, because I knew going home, I hardly had enough fare to get on the bus. I worked for a stockbroker as a draftsman, doing bar charts and graphs, and because he saw drawing ability, and this was in downtown Detroit, and I got like 85 or 90 cents an hour to do that, and it was a lot of money. And then I also went to work as a senior in high school for a structural steel fabrication company doing kip loads on beams at 18 years old. So I graduated from high school, had those 2 little jobs, and I worked at those 2 companies for the first year, and finally went to an architectural firm. Wow, I'm really stepping out now. And this kind of internal person, I was not extroverted, not maybe a AAA person that I stand before you today am. I was rather introverted, and I was rather quiet, and I assumed, by the way, in high school, I met my sweetheart wife today, who's still my wife 51 years later, so that was a big asset to me, and that proved that another decision, smart decision, and who I selected to be my spouse for the rest of my life was supportive all the way. Somebody who could support you. My parents did not know what to do with me. They had no idea how to talk to me and say, well, you want to do this, the technical what, architecture what? And my dad actually thought an engineer was somebody that ran a train, so it was a different time in life. And the point being is that in 53, when I got out and I went to work for an architect, this was another cavalier moment where I went to work for that architect. Says, Jim, we're not hiring anybody that's not going to college or hasn't graduated yet. I said, well, I'll go to college. And I started Lawrence Tech Night School in 1955. And through those 55s to 65, well, big quantitative jump here, that 10 years was my 20s. So at 20, I started going to night school, and I also joined the Navy Reserve to stay out of the Army. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, this kid, kind of, you know, not knowing where the hell he's going, was in night school all of a sudden, working at a full-time day job, and I was carrying full load here. I was carrying 16 credit hours at nights, and full-time day job, and Tuesday evenings putting on a little white uniform and going down to Broadhead Naval Army for Navy Reserve to stay out of the draft. It was probably the most tumultuous time of my life, and I would say I do not recommend that to anybody, and I would not recommend that to any of your children, to give up their lives, but it was a way to afford it, and this school provided the key ingredient, the opportunity. And I'm not here to market Lawrence Tech, but I got to tell you, without it, there would have been no career for me, because I wasn't going to go to U of D. They didn't have the same programs. University of Michigan didn't have extension courses of that type. I wasn't able, I had 2 kids, wasn't able to stop living just to go to school. So it was a way of life, and it was indelible to me to, again, that intensity, tenacity to complete what I started, except for 1 year. And 5 years after I was in night school and working full-time today, I came close to a nervous breakdown. And you know the cutoff time where you can cut off and get a W, a withdrawal? Okay, well, I cut the time off 2 days after the withdrawal. I had 5 Fs on my record. 5 flunks on my record. Now, if there was anything there that was entrepreneurial in spirit, it was, you know, well, there's 5 Fs. Does that mean I quit? No, the tenacity came up again and said, I'm going back to school next year. I'm going to start right from where I left off, and I did. And I had a lot of help here. I had some of the deans that said, you're back again, you know, because I had been 10 years at night school. In 1965, I graduated, again with a mortgage, 2 kids and a family, and a job. And then I started working those 7 or 8 jobs, and you know what? Jim Ryan started to come out. That introverted kind of kid, I was now working at firms that allowed me to talk to their clients. You have enough time in anything, you can start getting closer to it. I had been working for some of the greatest mentors. I still am friends with a few of them who are still alive today. They were older gentlemen that I worked for, and a lot of them have passed away, and I remember them dearly for what they taught me and what this institution brought to me. And there again, coming here at night school, driving every night, sleeping in the parking lot for 15 minutes, running in, grab a hamburger, a lot of you I'm sure do that, and then going to class was tenacity, the driven idea of getting through it. And then going home, doing homework at whenever it was. There was no weekends. I mean, it was completely gone for 10 years. And my wife stuck with me all through that time. And as that time went by, it was also building relationships. Some of the guys I worked for me later. I worked for them later. Some of the firms disappeared off the map. And through that time frame up until 1978, there were a couple of junior partnerships. There were a couple of relationships there that I still value because it was making me make decisions, and it was all starting to knit together. I mean, the fact that the 9 previous years before 1978, I went to work for one of the most influential guys in my life, a Chinese architect by the name of Y.E., who took me on a Saturday afternoon in 1968 down to North End Boulevard. We got out of the car on a Saturday morning. And I just told this gentleman this because I just met him again for the first time in a long time. Walked up to the door, went inside of the office, and walked in his room, and I said, Al Taubman, do you remember the first time I met you was with Y.E.? He said, no, I don't. I said, I walked in as a young 31-year-old guy, never done one lick of retail, and you were standing on your chair with your tailor, with your boxer shorts and your pants off. That was my impression of a developer right there. That's the first guy I ever met that was a developer. And I said, I just backed up and said, man, I don't know, do I want to be in here? And Wah said, this is Jim Ryan. He's going to come to work for us as a designer. You're going to teach him everything he knows. And Al, for the next 9 years, and I were close in his development. He was a 15-man organization at the time. He was a very wealthy man even then at 42. I was 31, he was 42. And today I'm working for his sons. But that 10 years allowed me to learn what the industry was that I wanted to practice in. It gave me an insight, doing a lot of homework on where it was going, the growth of the REIT market, real estate investment trust market. Families were now colluding on Wall Street to become a public entity, and they raised funds so they could not only pay themselves a lot of money, they could raise funds to buy other properties. So they became public. The Forbes people who we did Somerset Collection for, most of you may or may not have been there, is still a private family. They own it outright themselves. It's not a public company. So we work for the families. Now we're working for the Real Estate Investment Trust. The one trust that we worked for led us to other trusts. So for the first 10 to 12 years in the JPRA career, growth was doing renovations and remodeling, using the business principles, taking risks, borrowing money, signing on money, becoming the collateral behind it were usually my house, that type of thing. Getting to a point where the banks actually trusted us, so we didn't have unsecured collateral. I mean, we had unsecured collateral. So we could go in and borrow money without signing our firstborn away. And we started to grow. We grew from 12, 15, 20. Our first office actually was in almost a rock's throw of this campus. It was on 10 Mile in Southfield, right across from Southfield High School. This 600 square feet. We moved once to the opposite side of 10 Mile in Southfield, about 1,200 square feet. And then we moved 20-some years ago to a building where we had started with 10,000 square feet. Now we have about 22,000 square feet. And we're moving to a corporate office this December, our kind of, I hope it isn't final resting place, or looked at it that way, but a cohesive 30,000 square foot office building in Novi, Meadowbrook and 11 Mile, which will be our new corporate headquarters. So the story kind of gets knitted from, you know, this introverted individual who had no clue as to what this career was going to be, to somebody by watching other people, picking the best out of that audience. I was always conscious about people that had bad habits or bad traits. It's like my son-in-law, who's a police officer, never, ever in his life had one ticket or had one altercation with anybody. He knew at 8 years old, that's long before me, that he wanted to be a police officer, so he kept the slate clean. He's a lieutenant and will be ultimately the chief in West Bloomfield Police Department. So he knew where he was going. I didn't quite have that opportunity, and I don't know if you have. I know that some of the things that are important are the things I talked about, and that's relationships. Trust yourself. You're not going to create opportunity. Opportunity is going to be out there, and it's going to come to you, and you'll have the ability to make those decisions yourself. This school and the hard knocks that you're going through here is probably one of the best places, and as you know, and back as in many different ways as a spokesman for the school, not only raising money but giving money. So it's great to come back and give some back. People ask me, well, you know, are you going to retire? What's your plans? And I can tell them, I don't know. Right now there's a lot before me. I'm enjoying it, and I still go on hearing the lessons. And one of the things I think is endemic that every one of us at this age starts to grow with great sayings, and it's on the list as one of my other favorite sayings is, he's dead now, but Mies van der Rohe, a very famous architect, I don't know how many know that name, I think he was 65 years old, and he was talking to the Harvard Graduate School. Well, I got him by 7 years, and he had a confession to make, he said to them. He said, I confess that I'm living in the skin of a student. And I thought, that is really, really great. And I'll leave you with one other one, and that's my mother-in-law, who was 99 years old in 10 months. And she was an older Bulgarian lady who spoke very broken English. I always learned from her when she used to say, she'd learned something that particular day, and she'd look at me and say, Jimmy, I died yesterday, I not know that today. And I thought, what a great attitude. You know, you're learning something every day, and you can learn it from your next door cohort, you can learn it from your boss, you can learn it yourself. But there's a lot of times you're going to have to create that drive by taking risks, and you're being the teacher now. You're going to be the teacher. You're going to be up here a few years from now talking to people like yourselves, and you're going to offer them some of the advice, hopefully, that I told you and other lecturers will tell you, and it's not formulated. I don't think, in all due respect to the class and all due respect to the school, you can get it all out of books. You're going to have to take risks on your own. You're going to have to learn some of it. And I tell my own employees, before you came to work here, how much did you know about JPRA? All they knew is they wanted a job, and we were hiring. I said, well, you know, you had a portfolio. How important that portfolio is. On an engineering side, I don't know. Do you start showing all the formulas you corrected? Do you show what solutions to environmental analysis you've done to get your job? I doubt it. In our case, in the architectural case, it's graphic. I mean, it's two things. It's personal presentation today, very much, almost all personal presentation today, and secondly, about the graphic part from an architect's perspective. So, you know, what do you deliver is who you are. You know, how you behaved, how you've taken your school life serious. You know, I don't know how you create your own portfolio, but those marks you get, incredibly important. And I hate to think that, you know, here's a guy, by the way, in those years at Lawrence, I had to take Calc 3. I flunked Calc 1 twice till I took it, again, tenacity. I flunked Calc 2 twice, and I was really falling behind now because now I was a freshman, junior, sophomore, senior in class choices around the board. And when they said I had to take Calc 3, I said, I'll be here forever. And they waived it. So I didn't have to take Calc 3. They dropped it out. But I was a terrible, terrible engineering student. I didn't do great in structure until I got to my exams for the state boards. And I passed all of them the first time except structure. And I had to take it the second time and passed it. So, I mean, who you think you are under that skin and who your employer thinks you are under that skin might be a great person. And I think I'm the best example of that because I was absolutely not a candidate for entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship before I graduated from this school. The school did change me, the lifestyle changed me, and the great part about it is I was willing to change. I didn't just sit there and say, you know, I'm not going to change. This is not the way I'm going to do it. I love what I'm doing. This is standard quo. You might have even heard it from your parents. That's the way we always did it. You know, that's not the way it is today. And I've had to learn from you people in the industry. This thing is moving fast. The opportunities, just a moment on that, are absolutely phenomenal. You don't necessarily see them here in Michigan, and some of you are working for firms, I presume, and some of you are working for engineers who probably have a better handle on where the economy is relative to their own industry, but it's exploding. And I think Al Tallman mentioned it today, how Michigan, what an incredible state this is going to be. It is now, but with its water source as a commodity, you take a look down the road, and here's a tip from a financial and real estate genius, and that is to buy northern properties, not just in northern Michigan, but in Canada, because in, well, maybe in your lifetime, 40, 50 years, not mine certainly, those will be incredibly valuable lands because if you believe in climate warming, the climates are changing and moving up. We will have 2 growing seasons in Michigan agriculturally. We won't have to depend on the auto. We'll have a water source that we may go to civil war over in 100 years. Just think about it. So as that jet stream moves further and further away from what it's giving us as a great environment today, will change. But Michigan seems to be placed pretty well. And I have worked in 3 continents, South America and United Kingdom and the United Arab Emirates. We've had projects there. And I worked from coast to coast, north to south, east to west. And I can tell you, I am a dyed-in-the-wool Michigander because I don't think I could live in California as much as they purport it to be a great state. I've worked there. I've been there for a while. New York is full of the things that New York thinks it is, and it's really not. There's wonderful societies on their own and great neighborhoods on their own. But the culture, the Michigan culture, the understanding that you get, especially from a school like this, is absolutely endemic and will grow with you, and you'll have a much more level playing field to deal from here than you would in any of those other places. So just in closing, and I want to save time for some messages, you know, these are some of the, you know, bullet point notes I wrote down. You've already been studying this already, and it's, you know, The definition of entrepreneur, I had to look it up, you know, and Webster's, of course, I'm sure you've done this already, is to undertake. Undertake something that you've been dreaming about. I don't care if it's building a model airplane, you know, but undertake it and complete it. Take it through to the end. Take it through to the conclusion so it actually works. Not halfway through and say, I'm tired of that and do something else. It's synonymous with what you're going to be doing in life. Assume accountability and inherent risks. And when you assume accountability, and I'll tell you, I give the best example I can give to accountability is, you know, like running a red light. I mean, that person running the red light doesn't give a crap about anybody, just about himself. He's going somewhere and everybody else get out of the way. That's not accountability. That's arrogance, or in-your-face arrogance, and nobody wants to deal with that. Need to control and direct. I guess when I left the 7 or 8 firms I worked for, it was time for me to get control of my own life and not worry about working for somebody else, but working for myself. And directing and giving people work and seeing it to its fruition was so rewarding. To give a job to somebody and actually see them complete that job, I didn't have to complete it, they completed it, excuse me, was very, very rewarding for me. And the independent sides, you know, I guess that's another reason for leaving independence, your own independence, but independence is dependable. Dependability on somebody else. And I found out that my own independence was structured around somebody else that I could trust would be independent and dependent to me. Confidence, there's a kind of a fine line between confidence and self-confident, over self-confident, and arrogant and egotistical. I think you have to come off with a reasonable assurance that you feel confident that what you're talking about, what you're saying, is meaningful and right for that person that's asking you your opinion. Why give it if you're not confident? If you don't have an opinion, say, I'm not sure I really have an opinion. I don't understand what you're looking for, but if you give me some time to work it out, they'll never argue with that. If you tell them, I've asked clients straight out, what's the environmental impact of this project going to be? I say, are you kidding me? I don't know. You know, but I've got some people I can talk to and I'll find out and I'll get the answer back to you. So the ability to set goals and work towards them was probably always in that latent junior person the first 24 years. I just had to took me a lot longer than it's going to take you to develop those goals into a working relationship and to a final product. And I think the finality is not final. I mean, JPRA as a firm is going to go on and on and on. The legacy, hopefully, is something that I've given to them, certainly given a lot to me, and I've made a great living with other people, surrounding myself with people smarter than I am. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I'd like any questions from the audience if I can. I knew there would be none. No, I'm kidding you, but you know, any questions about the first 30 years, or the last 30 years, or the first 24 years? What time are we good to?
Oh, we don't have to leave yet.
Okay, I'm not ready to leave. I mean, I'm okay. I dropped a lot on you real quick, and it was more probably personal than PowerPoint, you know. I brought some of the stuff out in the lobby, and just on your rush to wherever you're going, you might take a look at some of that. But it wasn't about the pretty picture, actually. Our firm, actually, and I am particularly asked to make sure that what we're delivering is what we as a firm culture believe in and what we're really all about. In other words, I'm not doing a project just to do it and make the money and run like hell. I'm doing it because it's a legacy that's going to stay in there and people are going to walk through it. In this case, I'm talking primarily about shopping centers. I've also had a lot of time in this autumn, as they say, of your life, to think about, well, how else could you deliver the message? Would I even now go to work for a civic architect, somebody that does museums? Would I go to work for, if I wanted to leave and I don't, would I go to work for a hospital and deliver better spaces or better understanding? I mean, that's what all that gray hair is up there is for, I guess, is that you're now a lot more dependable, honest, and forthright. The forthright comes with that you're at a point that you can tell the truth, and you should be telling the truth. I think one of the things in this handout talks about honesty, and I've never, ever lied about what we're doing. It's important because you're held accountable. you are held accountable for it. And the smallest of those kinds of lies starts to grow and distort, like a bad joke. It never gets told the same way twice. And accountability is incredibly important. So I don't know what other messages I can leave you. Hopefully it would be around long enough for you all to work for our firm or with our firm. How many are in environmental engineering? Structural? Mechanical? Oh. You know what? Something about the, side note, about the mechanical engineering, it's a vanishing American from the architect's perspective. We have mechanical engineering firms that have disappeared right before my very eyes. And I think one of the reasons is architects never allowed them to make enough money. I mean, they would give us their fees on a known quantity of square footage or the size of the project, the complexity of the project, and they would give us a quote, and we'd argue about what is really going to take that much time, and you know, it wasn't saving money just for us because we had our own separate fees on the architecture. It was just really not, you guys and your predecessors have not educated the architect to what you really do and how much time it really takes and the responsibility behind all that. And you too have liability insurances and mouths to feed. So I remember the people I worked for years and years ago, prior to JPRA and the firms that I worked for, would really kick the you-know-what out of the mechanical engineers. And I could never understand it. Do you know what they do? I mean, how they're doing it and how much time it takes. And with computers today, the BIM system upon us, Revit and all of that, it's got to be entirely different. So, but I see a lack of, especially in Michigan, and maybe it's due to the economy, maybe it's due to the lack of construction here, a lack of good, solid mechanical engineers. Now, I also couple that with, our firm would not hire an electrical engineer over here, mechanical engineer over here, and the civil end of it, we would never ask responsibility for. We would recommend a civil guy or something like that, but he would be paid for by the owner because there's responsibilities there that we have nothing to do with. Mechanical and electrical guys, we would most often not hire independent people. We would want to see them either alliance, come together, because the continuity of those two people, and today it's a little different because now you have, hopefully, the BIM systems and the Revit systems, computers integrated to bring those systems to us architects and integrate with our architecture. But I'm wondering where they've all gone. And I know the big firms are in New York, the big firms are out in California, Boston, some large ones down in Miami. And we are now starting to work with the bigger firms, reluctantly, actually. We like a smaller firm. We're a big firm by maybe local standards. We're not certainly Smith Group or Arcadis or any of those kinds, but we're a 100-man office, it's a pretty good sized office. We try to seek a like kind of mentality and a like culture that's roughly around the same size of us, but more importantly, the guy that knows the job. And I hope for your sake that you understand there's a big need out there. There really is a big need. Now this is on the engineering mechanical systems for building side. I'm not talking about power plants. I'm not talking about things you do on your own, very heavy engineering that might be involved also with environmentalists, but primarily on the construction, architectural, consultant side. So that's good news, it seems to me, but it's only good news if you join the firm that wants to stay and work in this area. And by the way, most of the architects that work in this area are absolutely nuts, and I would say this publicly to the AIA. If they think just working in one state they're going to survive, they're not anymore. You have to have tentacles that go all across this country to survive today. And again, your business acumen, your business marketing culture needs to take advantage of that. Associations, alliances. We're working with architects that are twice as big as us, 4 times as big as us, but they don't have what we have. So we're able to bring in that to them and become part of their team, whether it's on the production side, the design side, or both sides. Any hands? A lot of curious looking people.
Somebody's got a question. Somebody's thinking of something.
Not a dumb question, guys. Just how many are all seniors? Hands up. Wow. Right at the end, huh? Yeah, the world awaits you. So, how many are working for engineers right now?